Oh, Lord of the Rings, an unending tale indeed. Well, patient dogs, they say, eat the fattest bone, and that's the current situation for the fans who are eagerly anticipating the arrival of the option-based stealth performer set in Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings Gollum. Besides the disappointment of having it released later than its previously scheduled date, which is September 1st, the Lord of the Rings Gollum's delay is a boon because it means its quality will be improved. Stay on to find out the improvement in the game. So, what is the Lord of the Rings Gollum all about? The game is an action-adventure game created by a German studio famous for making action-packed games, Daedalic Entertainment. Some games by the company include the Deponia series, their most popular output, Shadow Tactics, Blades of the Shogun, and 2018's State of Mind. Daedalic struck a deal with Middle-earth Enterprises to work on Gollum, and that means the game will draw from the books and not movies. The game was announced in 2019. Did you even know that Daedalic once announced a delay in the game? Daedalic Entertainment announced a few-month delay in the Lord of the Rings Gollum game for the team to deliver the best possible experience. It's quite appreciative that the decision was made not to launch it in an inadequate state. In the meantime, fans only have a couple of gameplay snippets to revert to since the official announcement of the show. The game's arrival was initially slated to launch in 2021 before being extended to 2022. It was originally set to release on September 1st, 2022 for PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series XS. Now it's unclear when it will drop after this recent delay. Now let's look at the list of characters, shall we? So, during a preview, viewers got a glimpse of the Elven King in the realm of Mirkwood, along with Gandalf, who will also be making an appearance during the time of Gollum. Along with some familiar characters from Tolkien's world, there will also be some new faces that the players will encounter during the levels that can help them along the way. One of the characters is a young elf called Mel, who Gollum meets in Mirkwood, and Greshneg too, who players will encounter in Barad-dûr. Crucially, Daedalic's version of Gollum will look nothing like the character in the Lord of the Rings movies. As producer Kai Feibig explained, we started with the person he was and then evolved him, and further said, you can see that this was once something like a human being before the ring corrupted him. Another pending question is if the dialogues need to change as well. That's a big call from the fans and critics alike. Look at the trailer again, and you will see that this tale continues to set the tone of the game as brooding and suspenseful has been received, but many important details about the game have been neglected for that. Its basic platforming and stealth have been described as its meat and potatoes, but the dialogue system is where the Lord of the Rings Gollum can truly stand out the most from other action-packed games. The game's most compelling feature seems to be its inner conflict minigame by a landslide. The fans know that the character Gollum, or Sméagol, is burdened by one ring and the overwhelming hold it has on him. Previously a common hobbit, Sméagol became physiologically corrupted by the ring's malignancy and eventually developed a second personality in Gollum. In Lord of the Rings, this dueling personality examines Sméagol's solemn innocence and trauma, and at the same time, it examines Gollum's sinister deception and rage. If a similar thing is to be portrayed in the Lord of the Rings Gollum, it could make for some exciting choices in gameplay and narrative, depending on what the player chooses. But the inner conflict system being described as a minigame raises some initial concerns. The game tasks players with choosing between several lines of dialogue that also functions as choices for what to do in a particular sequence. These choices are colored green for Sméagol or red for Gollum, marking them different from one another. This would have been better if it was its only mechanic rather than the minigame mechanic, and it has these dialogue options moving around the screen, which seemingly makes it more difficult for players to choose the dialogue option they want. It's obvious that this is intended to illustrate how Sméagol's and Gollum's thought to clash, but having dialogue bouncing around for players to catch seems obtuse. Rather, the dialogue options could have been unmarked as either a Sméagol or Gollum line and left ambiguous as to which half of his psyche players are succumbing to. Either way, it was noted previously that the dialogue system is subject to change, and maybe the game's most recent delay was to implement that change. The look of the inner conflict mechanic before may be different from its look at launch. Hopefully, the Lord of the Rings Gollum will fetch it out and make it look satisfying. This particular Lord of the Rings Gollum dialogue choices will be fundamentally important to the game's narrative, if they are supposed to be meaningful and comprehensive, with weight leaning towards either side of the Hobbit's psyche. The game is an untold narrative, which means it has at least some creative license with events that take place. For instance, the likes of the Lord of the Rings Gollum's Gandalf and Thranduil probably did not need to be included to make the tale about Gollum interesting, but more copies of the Lord of the Rings Gollum may be sold if established and iconic characters are slated to make an appearance. With that, the game having any sort of creative license does suggest that the players can make very intriguing choices. Also, it's unclear whether the Lord of the Rings Gollum is meant to conclude as an epilogue to The Hobbit or lead into The Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. However, if it does not connect to any, it lends itself to an unexpected conclusion with branching endings that could be exciting. As its choice-based dialogue and inner conflict systems would suggest, if there are multiple endings, The Lord of the Rings Gollum could have fulfilling endings based on the one they listen to more to the thoughts of either Gollum or Sméagol. This may mean a good or bad ending, and fans already know what will happen to Gollum. Whether it's connected to mainline lore or not, Daedalic Gollum needs to have substantial branching choices if it wants its dialogue to be significant. One more thing though, the gameplay may also be important outside of the dialogue system. See, apart from its narrative implications, the inner conflict feature may also be turned to when making decisions on how to approach even ordinary circumstances. For instance, players may decide whether to platform around an enemy, drop an environmental trap on them, or silently dispose of them in another way. If designed well, these moments will provide replayability, as hopefully there are several ways to approach different scenarios, and everyone's experience with the game may differ depending on which actions they took through the dialogue. Regardless of this, The Lord of the Rings Gollum's inner conflict feature will be important because the game consists of simple platforming and also stealth. And then let's now get down to the details of the gameplay. Not a lot of footage has been shown to enlighten fans about what the gameplay looks like. Rather, between dialogue choices, it appears as if the player will be simply navigating through the fantastical Middle-earth environments. As he can't conquer the enemies by charging into battle, he has to rely on its ability to feel sounds and see in the darkness, to use dark spaces to curtail his enemies. With skills gained over the last 500 years, Gollum is an experienced freestyle climber who can also jump across platforms, hang on ledges, and fit into tight spots to get away from or around his enemies. Part of the gameplay will also focus on Gollum's inner battles with his hobbit self, Sméagol. Daedalic Entertainment CEO Karsten Fichtelman told The Hollywood Reporter that in Gollum, you already have that big conflict in the character, which means there's a good reason there are decisions to make in the game, the Sméagol decisions or the Gollum decision. Most recently, Daedalic released a stealth gameplay trailer, which shows Gollum sneaking through different locations in the world. With his small stature, the protagonist can be seen using the shadows to his advantage to avoid nearby enemies. Stealth in Gollum is a result of Gollum being cunning and agile, but not capable of winning a fight against an elf or orc foot soldier. So the inner conflict minigame and dialogue choices are evidently important in the game and are its backbone regarding the gameplay. Are you a fan eagerly anticipating Lord of the Rings Gollum? Have you watched a snippet of the game? What are your thoughts on it? We'd love to know from the comments section. Thanks for watching this video. See you in the next one. Bye for now.